All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Mac. And today we're going to do uh, kind of something that is one of those projects that kind of seems like it's complicated on the surface, um, but with the combination between typical surfacing and SubD, I think it's actually going to be not that terrible. So the only thing that is going to be terrible is obviously this sketch that I'm working off of because I threw it together really quickly before we got going. And the reason I do that, if you haven't watched these before, is I usually sit down either the night before, the morning of, and I do a quick sketch of something that I'm going to demo, and I don't practice it. I don't build it. I don't think about how I'm going to build it. I just do the sketch and then jump into it. And the reason that I do that is I try to put myself in the same position that you would be in if you had been, handed a sketch. Someone walks into your office and hands you a sketch and says, "I need this by, in an hour." And so I try to put myself under the same pressure that you'll be under when you're faced with something like this. And the other thing is, I want these demos to be very authentic and very accurate and very real. And if we get into something in Rhino and the wheels fall off, I want to make sure that we talk about that. We're not trying to sugarcoat anything that doesn't work. But if something does go off the rails, we'll talk about it and then figure out a way to get out of it. And so I try to make these demos as realistic as possible. I don't know how many other software demos you've seen in the past, but they get to be a little bit ridiculous in the fact that they'll sit and they'll model for a couple of hours and everything just works perfectly and every blend works and every surface works and everything. That's not how the real world works. You know that, and I know that, and so we try to represent that here, and be fair, showing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all that kind of stuff. So with that out of the way, what I'm hoping to accomplish here today is to first of all look at this sketch that we've all just been handed, right, including me, and think about what is going to happen here. And if we break this down a little bit and we look at, let me grab my drawing tools here. If we look at the way that this thing is constructed, there's this smokes drawn with a mouse. Um, there is this base shape, right? And if we ignore everything else, we could just say that this is essentially going to be one flat surface, right? It's gonna, if we looked at it from top view, it's gonna kind of bend around like that, right? But for more or less, this is essentially one big smooth surface. And when we look at a big smooth surface like that, especially one that has a specific shape, we need to make a call right off the bat and say, is that going to be a NURB surface, or is that going to be a SubD surface, or how are we going to do this, or what are we going to do? And in my estimation at this point, this surface itself is probably going to be NURBS. This transition right here, again, I'm drawing with a mouse. I haven't had a stroke. That just is trying to draw with the mouse instead of the pen. Um, this this surface here is probably going to be NURBS. This transition is also probably going to be NURBS. So this entire front piece of this goggle is probably going to end up being NURBS. This also probably is going to end up being NURBS. This little detail down here, also probably going to end up being NURBS. So then you say, okay, well, great, I came here for the SubDs. When is that going to kick in? And the answer to that would be if we now look at what's behind this, right? The interface, the cup between the goggle and the face, right? This piece that's kind of peeking out down here. This is where SubD is going to come in and be the superhero, because what we can do is project a curve onto the last, right? Onto the head last. And goggles and glasses and everything are only as good as the head last that you're using. And in this case, this head last is actually fairly terrifying, but it's the only one I had. So we're going to just work off that and assume that it's not as bad as it actually is. But shoes and glasses and anything, gloves and boots and all that kind of stuff that fit onto the body are really, the product is only going to be as good as the last that you're working off of, which is why shoe companies all have their own proprietary lasts, and they're fairly heavily guarded. If you call Nike and ask them if you can have a scan of one of their lasts, they're probably going to hang up on you, because they're not going to share that information, because they've spent decades refining the fit of that last. And so goggles and gloves and anything like that also have the same kind of issue. So in this case, because I have a terrible last, we're only going to end up with, hopefully not a completely horrible product, but you're not going to want to print it and stick it on your face, because this thing probably doesn't have any bearing in actual reality as far as how it's going to fit into an actual human head. So with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about how this thing is set up. And basically, I've got this SubD head that I had laying around, and it's probably something I've had for years. And anybody who has studied anatomy in any way, shape, or form, and their eyes are already bleeding from looking at this thing. But we go to war with the army we have, not the one we necessarily want. So this is what we're going to use today. And with it, I took a screenshot of this thing, and then I brought it into Sketchbook Pro, which is one of my favorite drawing apps, despite being made by one of my, shall we say, a different company. I do actually really like that program, and so I run in Sketchbook Pro, did the drawings over this, and then brought this back in as a picture frame. Because it was a screenshot of the model, it lines up perfectly. So this is actually kind of a really nice way to work, and it gives us what we need. I brought the image in as a picture frame. I put it in front of the model so that I could get it aligned, and then for the time being, I'm probably just going to hide the head last. So I'm going to just change its layer, and then we're probably just going to hide it. I'm going to move back up here and hide that for now, so that we can just focus on the drawing. And the drawing is just a simple picture frame. I threw it on a layer. I'm going to lock that layer, and I dimmed it a little bit by picking it, going to the material properties, and that's going to think for a second, and changing the transparency down here, which is where all of that happens, right? So I can dim this out a little bit so I can work over it, and also make it a little less apparent how terrible the drawing is. So let's go back to the layer stack, and I'm going to just lock this because it's on its own layer, and actually it should be on its own layer. There we go. And let's just start laying this out in NURBS. And basically what we're going to do is just start with a control point curve. I'm going to pick a convenient starting point, probably somewhere out here, and we're just going to draw some shapes. And I'm going to overbuild this because we are going to trim it. And I'm going to start by just getting myself some curves. Something like that. And there we've got our basic starting point. Now, I think what I'm going to do actually, because you can see what's happening in the front view when I'm trying to work, because the curves are on the construction plane, and the image is in front of the construction plane, the curves and stuff are actually behind the drawing, which drives me nuts. And so what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to unlock this image for a second, and I'm going to just use Gumball, and I'm going to just slide this straight back so that it's actually behind the drawing now, or behind the curves. And now everything starts to look a little better. And so now I'm going to grab my curves. I'm going to trim them, and I'm just going to trim the ends off of this. And my curves are really faint. I'm going to actually bump that up a little bit. So let's go to the preferences. Curves are very, very thin on this. And let's go to display modes. Let's go to wireframe, and let's go to objects. And the curves, I'm going to bump the curve width up to about 6 so that we can see what's going on here. And that should give us a little better example. I apologize, there's construction at my office today, so we're going to be listening to some construction noises in the background. I'll try and talk louder. All right, so we've got our original curves, right? And in this case, if we look at them in comparison to the head last, we can see that they are behind here. So let's grab the head last. I'm going to unlock this, and I'm going to slide this back in space as well so that it's behind our curves. And I think what I'm going to do is instead of trying to you know, project curves and do all that kind of stuff, I'm going to make my life super easy. And I'm going to just do this. I'm just going to create a curve from 4 sides here. And we're going to just pick these curves. I'm going to lock this head last so it's not in the way. All right, so we're going to use 4 curves here. And we're just going to get a surface. And the nice thing about this surface is it's very well structured. If I turn the points on, it's very simple and it's very easy to manage. And so I can now take this, and if I go to the top view, I have, I'm going to hide the curves for a minute and then turn the points back on for the surface. I have a very kind of easy to understand thing set up here, right? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 control points in this direction. I've only got 3 in this direction, which is nice because I can add crown to this as needed and all that kind of stuff. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to sculpt these points to do what I want them to do. And this is an often overlooked but extremely powerful part of modeling in any NURBS program, but especially in Rhino. And what it allows you to do is to very precisely place things where you want them to go. And it also kind of frees you from having to take just what the program gives you, right? We can actually get more out of this than we had originally, you know, intended. And so I'm just going to pull this around a little bit, and I'm going to get these where I want them to be. And we can do this on a fairly precise level. Now, the cool thing about this is when you start pulling points like this, you're going to start seeing things happen that you didn't see in the sketch. And this is one of the things, I had a conversation recently online where somebody was talking about how, you know, was bemoaning the death of sketching, right? And how art schools weren't, you know, putting out people who could sketch well enough. And boy, that was just going to be the end of the world as we know it. And I kind of laughed because it's the same conversation that happens anytime a new tool comes out. You know, markers came out and all the gouache people were like, it's the end of the world, you know, and now Gravity Sketch comes out and everybody's like, it's the end of sketching. And you know, to me, one of the things about sketching is it's nice because you can get, you know, your ideas down quickly and you can have a communication with yourself. But as we see right now, this sketch that I created, if I look at it, is already been proven to be lying, cheating, and stealing because it doesn't work on the body, right? And so when we get into 3D and when we start looking at this stuff in 3 dimensions, that's when all the lies go away and we can start actually seeing what this stuff is going to do. And to some extent, and to be honest, I was a really big sketch snob, by the way. I went to Center for Creative Studies in Detroit. Sketching was king, and you either drew like the wind or you were out of that place. And so I came from a really, really, really sketch heavy background, and you're like, well, not according to the sketch you just showed us. Yes, I know it's been a while. I don't do it as much anymore now because I do the stuff in 3D modeling. So settle down. But the thing that has become apparent to even an old warhorse like myself who grew up in a very, very sketch heavy environment is that you can lie, cheat, and steal with a sketch, and designers have been doing that for years, and so to some extent there is a paradigm shift going on where 3D becomes more and more important, where it's now starting to get to the point where if you can design effectively in 3D, and Rhino is really, really good at allowing you to be able to design in 3D because it's fast and because it's flexible and because it's durable and all those kind of things, right? Then you can start saying like, well, gee, this sketch fell apart really quickly because none of the stuff actually works on the body. And if I bring this image back, right, if I take this and I unlock this and I move this back so we can see what's going on, you can probably see almost immediately how fast this sketch has turned out to be a complete and utter, you know, I don't want to say waste of time, but it has, you can see its limitations. You can see where the wheels fall off. And so that to me is one of the main reasons why I so much appreciate 3D tools like Rhino and Gravity Sketch and all these other stuff that's out there that's amazing, is because it allows you to be able to check yourself and say, okay, well, this curve down here actually isn't the way that this is going to work in reality. It's going to come out more something like this. And this sticking out here in space like this is probably not very realistic, because if I come out here and I start following the sketch, I can see that that thing sticks way out. So maybe that one works, maybe it doesn't. We'll have to decide later. But the cool thing about this is because we're in 3D, we can make these decisions and we can design on the fly. Okay, the thing that I try and put across in all of my videos and everything that I try and teach people and all the students in the classes and all the stuff I try to put out here from the world headquarters of Rhino training, which happens to be my basement at the moment. Thanks, pandemic. Is I want this to be a design tool. I don't want this to be a CAD tool. I don't want to be, just telling folks how to do CAD models. I'm a CAD modeler. I do CAD modeling. No, you don't. You're a designer, and this is an art supply, right? This is markers, this is paint, this is clay, this is, if you're as old as me, gouache and chalk and spray fix and all that kind of stuff. This is an art supply, right? This is not a CAD modeling tool. This is an art supply, and this is something that we're going to use to design things with, which is why I always try to talk about the process and the thought and everything that goes into doing something like this, so that we're not focused on, the things that CAD modelers focus on, right? so, so, so all of that said, we're kind of at a place here where we can say, okay, if I compare this to my drawing, I can see where my drawing was lying. I like this shape in the top, so I'm going to adjust this a little bit more like that, and I'm going to say, okay, this is kind of working. I'm going to maybe pull this over just a little bit more. But this obviously was not a shape that was going to work well with the body, so I'm actually going to leave it down here like this and say that that is going to now be the driving shape for my object. And so when I hide the images, we can say that that is going to be, kind of our base surface that we're going to work from. So let's bring our image back for a second, and I'm going to hide the head last because it's creepy, and I'm going to start working from this point forward. And so for now, I'm going to leave these corners alone. I'm not going to try and trim this out or anything like that, because we can always go back and deal with that. Once we add thickness, we're going to have a vertical edge here, right? If I just extrude this to illustrate the point, I'm going to have a vertical edge here when we add thickness to this. When I run a fillet on that edge, or a blend, or whatever it is that's gonna round that edge, I'm going to get this corner for free. So I'm not going to freak out about that right now, and I'm not gonna trim this or do anything like that. I'm just going to try and keep this as simple as possible for the time being. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add my thickness here. I'm just going to leave it alone, and that's going to be my base. That's going to be my base surface. And in fact, that's probably a step too far already. So I'm going to actually undo that. And let's just go ahead and add the front of the rest of this. Okay. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, we might be able to get the shell tool to do some lifting for us later. So I am going to throw this in there. And if it turns out that I don't need it, I can always get rid of it later. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to just bank that for the time being. So I'm going to extract this edge, or this surface, and I'm going to hide this for the time being. I'm just going to throw this on a new layer. And we'll throw this here. And I'm just going to hide that. So I've got it, right, later if I need it. Because once I start trimming this and cutting this up and doing other stuff like that, it's going to be more of a hassle. So, all right, so let's start drawing our new shapes in here. And listen to the soothing sounds of the nail gun in the background. I hope you can't hear that, but there's a nail gun going on in the background. And I'm gonna do a little family of shapes thing down here, where I'm gonna just edit this curve a little bit so that it fits a little nicer with that. And I do only have an hour and a half here, so I'm not gonna get too crazy. And I'm gonna split this surface. With that curve. That's going to give me this object. And then I'm going to draw a new curve. And I'm going to get this shape in here. Now, I could massage these curves a lot more than I'm doing. And just to be clear, if I was doing this for a client, I would absolutely do that. But I'm trying to move quickly here. So let's hide our image for the time being. Any questions so far, by the way? Now I'm going to take this. This is actually going to be a transition surface. So I'm going to just delete it because I don't need it for right now. It's going to get replaced with something else. And this surface actually is going to come forward to make our thickness. And I'm going to relocate the gumball by clicking on the bunny tail. And I'm going to stick it over here. And I'm going to use the scale handle, and I'm going to just flatten this surface out a little bit, because the front of this is actually fairly flat like that. I'm going to leave a little bit of curvature to it, but not a lot. And then I'm going to just simply use the blend surface to hook this back together. And I always have to go looking for it on the Mac side. I'm just going to type it. And we're going to just blend from here to here. And for now, I'm going to do this just at position. I'm not even going to bother trying to do continuities or anything like that, because I think what I want is my fillets a little bit more localized right in here. And so I don't want to have to try and deal with managing all of that at the time being. So I'm going to just go ahead and run this. And that's going to give us our base object, right? And then we can go and we can throw a little fillet in here. And we can, I'm going to just blend these edges. I like to use blend. I talk about this in several of my other videos. I like to use blend over fillet because blend is continuity based where fillet is circular. And I think that the blends look nicer than the fillets do. That blew over the edge, so I'm going to undo it. I'm going to preview it this time so I can see what happens. So that's too big down there, so I'm actually going to add a handle. All right, so it looks like about 2.5 gets us where we need to go, and it keeps it in here. So I'm going to use that, and that is going to give us kind of our basic object. And if I turn the thickness back on, you can see that we've got this object, and then I can decide, like, how do I want to handle this? Do I want to shell it? And in this case, I would do, you know, a very, very small shell. And I have no idea what the units are here. That might even be too big. I didn't measure this before I started, so. All right, so it did shell it, but it's telling me that the shell is not solid. And so I may go back and I may do this manually. And to do that manually, what I would do is I would pull this and this and this as a copy, and I'd join them. And then I'm going to scale this a little bit, and I would measure this if I was going to do this for real, so that I know what my actual offset is. And then I would just pull this through. I would probably untrim this object. Actually, it's not even trimmed. Never mind. So let's put that in there. Actually, let's extend that surface. So because this is not a trimmed object, it doesn't matter if I untrim this, it's only going to give me that much. So what I actually need to do is I need to extend this surface. And I'm going to just pull this a little deeper. And let's do our extension point. Thinking. Let's do this. Let's do this like 5 units. Now I'm going to save this. And it looks like we could even extend maybe even a little further, but I'm going to just, for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to assume we're good. And let's do a Boolean difference of this with this. And that gives us, you know, essentially our shelled object. We'll blend this off. We'll blend this edge off here. That probably could be just a hair bigger since the other one was 0.25. Let's do 0.3 just to make sure that it's a little bit bigger than the other one. And that doesn't work, so let's do 0.275. If you overdo it, it becomes very clear. The fillet will fail. All right, so that gives us our basic part. And let's bring back the head last and take a look and see how that looks. We can mirror this. And that gives us our basics here. How are we doing so far? Any questions? Feel free to hit the chat if you have any questions. All right, I'm going to hide this one for now because we're going to continue to work on this side. And let's hide the head last. And let's bring the image back. And let's go ahead and add this detail down here. This is actually a cool little detail, and this is an easy thing to make, even though it seems like it's kind of complicated. And there's a formula for doing these. And basically what it is an exterior curve, and I'm going to follow my shape a little bit better than my sketch, like this. Then copy paste, and we're going to scale this curve a little bit to make the inside. And then I'm just going to reposition it a little bit like that. And then we're going to, if we want this piece in here to sink down a little bit, we're just going to do a straight line across here like that. And that gives us basically what we need in order to be able to split up this surface and do this. So I'm going to extract this surface again. And I'm going to keep just the curves in that surface. And what I'm going to do is split this surface with these curves. And what that's going to do is that's going to break this up into a couple of different pieces. And so for now, this piece is just going to delete, right? We're going to get rid of that. This piece, I'm going to shrink trim surface. And what that's going to do is that is going to collect the control points that made up that surface into the closest trimmed approximation that it can to that surface. Because before, those control points were way out here, right? So before I did that, if I turn on the control points for this, because it's part of the surface, the control points are way out here, right? That's not entirely useful. So what I'm going to do is when I shrink this, you can see that the control points then collect into what would be the best approximation for that as a trim surface. Now, the cool thing about that is I can now take these points right here and I can just bend those in like that. And that gives me the little dip that makes up that shape. I can join this back in if it will join. Sometimes it doesn't because you bent it. And if that's the case, then we can either match or we can blend off of this. And yeah, that won't match because it's a trim surface. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to build a little blend surface between the two. But that's okay. We can actually even use this if we wanted to, if we untrimmed this and then matched it. If we untrim that and then we were to match surf, or we could even build a surface off of that. And if we match the tangency, that kind of works. So let's go ahead and do that. We may need to refine it because it's let's refine the match, get it a little closer. Say match. So now that will join like that. And then we can go back and edit our control points again to get what we wanted. And in this case, I think I'd probably leave these points alone because that's our match. I'd leave these points alone because that's our tangent, but I would grab these and I would pull these probably in a little bit like that. And I grab these, pull those in a little bit like that. That gives us our shape. That's got a little wonk to it. You know what? I don't love that. Let's clean that up just a little bit. Points are like Pokemon. You got to get them all. There we go. That's a little better. This one, let's pull it down like that. I'm gonna go to wireframe so I can see what I'm doing. There they are. I'm gonna say, where'd that point go? I know a lot of times when I do this, this is the first time that people have seen point editing, especially if you're kind of more on the beginner side of things. Don't be afraid of pulling points. This is a really cool part of modeling in Rhino, and I definitely want you to feel comfortable doing it. So I'm going to reposition this, and then we're going to just trim this surface back out to get our basic shape again. All right, so now we've made our shape. And it looks like we have a little bit more work to do. The key when you're doing point manipulation is to keep your surfaces simple. And in this case, you know, I'm not in total love with this thing. We may want to pick at this just a little bit longer and get the shapes to be a little less bad. Like that. That's a little better. And then the last thing that we're going to do is just simply blend these two together. I'm going to hide this image because it's in the way. So let's join this up. And then we're going to use blend surf. And we're going to blend from here to here. We're going to do this at tangency. And then you end up with this lovely little detail. Say OK. And we may need to match these ends. And it will work because it's not a trim surface. And we're going to use the preserve iso curve direction. And we are going to refine it. And I'm just going to do position at this point because I don't want to make a whole lot of changes. I just want that end to be able to join. Join this up. And that gives us, if we go to rendered view, this really nice little faded detail. All right, let's bring everything back. And it looks like the back on this needs to get trimmed out as well. So what I would probably do is I would grab this object, probably pull these curves. So if we go extract or duplicate edge, we can duplicate these edges and then hide everything except this using isolate. Go to the front view, grab this and trim. Actually, I'm going to split that because I may want to use that. And then I can either bend this, or I can, let's bend it. Let's do that. I'm going to bend it kind of somewhere in the middle like this. It didn't quite get what we wanted. So let's shrink trim surface, turn the points on. Go to wireframe. And let's grab these points. And again, we can untrim this surface. And then we can match this edge here. Don't like that. So let's get it a little closer. That was a big ask for match to get that entire thing. We're just going to pull it closer so that it doesn't have to torture the thing so much. And it looks like what might be happening here, make sure I'm matching to the right edge. And let's take a look at the edges just to see what's going on. It might be that this edge is broken up into a couple of pieces, and it looks like it is. See that? That's why the match was failing. There's actually an edge here, here, and here. So there's 3 edges here. So there's a tool down here to fix that. And if we come down here to the analysis tool, edge tools, merge edge, I'm going to merge that edge back into one edge. This is a really, really, really underutilized, underknown, everybody should be knowing and using it tool, but they don't. Because it allows you to be able to get the correct result that you would in something like that. Now, I'm not going to refine the match for the time being. I'm just going to get it close. And then I'm going to do a little bit more point editing to get the surface the way I want. The other way to do this, and maybe that bears some worth, is to extract some curves. Let's duplicate some edges. Let's duplicate that edge. And then I'm going to split this curve into a couple of pieces. And I'm going to split it with a point. I'm going to split it there. I'm going to split it there. And I'm not even going to worry about that. So what this does now is this gives me 2 curves that are a little bit easier to deal with. And if I rebuild these curves, instead of having 20 control points, if we rebuild them to have, I don't know, 4, because that's all they need, and I rebuild those, then I have, let's see, did those go SubD friendly? Yes, I don't want that. I don't want these to be SubD friendly. Then what I can do is I can turn on the points for just these curves. And those are a little bit easier to deal with, because I can grab this and this and this, and I can deal with this a little bit easier than the surfaces, right? See, those points stay put. So I'm going to pull these out like that, and then I'm going to deselect this and this by command dragging, and then I'm going to pull these out a little bit more like that. And then I'm going to deselect these with command dragging, and then I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to overbuild this a little bit like that. Now I've got a perfect 2-rail sweep, right? This is easy. I was making it harder than it needed to be. That is a much easier solution. And if I extend this surface, let's go, I don't know, 10 units. I'm going to just do it as a line. There we go. Like that. And like that. And then like that. I've got a nice overbuilt surface that I can then just take and trim. I'm going to type CRV, and then I'm going to pick that edge and that edge. Go to the front view, go to wireframe, and I'm going to trim this object using those curves. And it looks like that curve is probably not going to get me there. Because of the curvature of that shape. So I'm going to actually turn the points on and pull this surface just a little bit that way so that it would. Trim, CRV, and I'm going to pick that curve and that curve. We'll just trim this back. Then let's take this object. I'm just going to shift control click that. I'm going to start dragging and I'm going to hold down command and I'm going to just pull the surface off of that. I think I'm going to untrim this and then use that object instead. There we go. There we go. And that's our little pocket. And we'll check it. Let's check for show edges. Make sure we don't have any naked edges. One naked edge, so let's see where it is. And in this case, it looks like it's a surface. Looks like this got broken apart. Looks like it either got moved. So I'm going to just move my gumball here. All right. All right, so we fixed that. That should be no naked edges now. One closed poly surface. All right, so we've got our closed poly surface. And we bring back, I'm going to get rid of the curves at this point. Let's mirror this. That gives us our approximately our goggles. Now we can start talking about knocking off these edges over here. And we're going to just do that with blend. Maybe go a little bigger. Doesn't look like it like that. Didn't like that one. So let's try it again. Oh my God, this mouse is driving me nuts. The right click on it doesn't work to accept something. So if you hear me furiously banging on it, it's because I'm trying to hit enter and it won't accept the right click as an enter. All right. And these guys, we're just going to knock these off a little bit. And those are going to be way too big. I like the top one, I don't like the bottom, so let's do them one at a time. Anybody who wants to stay for the after party where I take this mouse out in my garage and beat it to death with a hammer is welcome to join. This may be this mouse's last day on Earth. All right, so there's our goggles. Despite construction noise and equipment failures and lack of talent and all sorts of other things we're dealing with today. Oh, what fun. All right, so let's take a look at, let's hide the head last again. Let's bring our image back. And let's talk about how we're going to connect these two pieces together. And I want this to be locked. Good grief. And basically what we're going to do is we're just going to build a little blend surface between these two guys. And so if I draw out the curves basically the way that I want them, and I'm not even going to worry about snapping into anything, I just want a basic reference for where this stuff is going to go. And then I'm going to hide the image. And then if I go to the front view, you can see that, you know, basically where this stuff is all going to kind of land. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this guy for now. And I'm going to go over here and I want to pull apart this. So I'm going to extract these two surfaces. I'm not going to copy them. And then I'm going to go to the front view and I'm going to hide all but just that stuff. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this surface and this surface with all these curves. So I've got a surface here, and there like that. And what I can do now is I can get rid of these and bring this back. And if I join this back up, which seems counterintuitive, but what it does is it breaks the surfaces up into pieces that I can sub-object select now, right? That all is stuff that I can work with. So now when I mirror this, I've got two pairs of this stuff that I can deal with. And so I can go from here to here, I can delete that, and I can use blend surf or loft or whatever I want. In fact, I'll probably just use loft. And we can just loft from here to here. Oh my God. This mouse. Why? How would you have a mouse that doesn't have a right mouse button that works? Unbelievable. All right, so let's use this as a reference. I'm going to pull these points. I'm going to scale them in a little bit like that. And then that's the basis of our part. We can pull these forward a little bit or back, you know, maybe we get a little bit of nose clearance in there. And then we can just put the rest of the pieces together. We can do a one rail sweep for the top and the bottom. And then a two rail sweep for the back. And that connects our pieces together. Now, as far as the cup for the SubD parts, that's when it starts to become a little bit interesting. And I think we're getting pretty close to being wrapped up here. But what I want to do on this particular case is I'm going to hide this part for now. And I'm going to go actually to the last itself, and I'm going to unlock this. And I'm going to shift command click, and I'm going to select a ring from the SubD. And I'm going to extract it. And actually, I want to copy it, so I need to undo that. Let me go to the extract and turn the copy on, and then do this again. Now I've got a copy. Nope. Why? Why? Oh my God, today. You guys are patient. I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to put this back where I found it, which is right here. And then what I can do is be reasonably assured that that's going to fit, right? And if you had a scan of a head and it was unorganized triangles, you could always run quad remesh on it. You run quad remesh, and then you can use the to SubD command, and then the to SubD command. There's a to NURBS command, which allows you to be able to basically go from an unorganized mesh to a NURBS part, right? But the cool part about that is you can also stop in the middle and end up with a SubD, which is how we ended up with this head. This was a scan. Then it was retopologized. I don't think this was retopologized using quad remesh. I think it was retopologized manually. But once you have this topology, then you can use it for things like this. And so I'm going to take this, I'm going to move this to here, and then let's hide the head last, and let's bring our goggles back. And we can say that that is essentially the gasket, right? That's the thing that's gonna touch the face. And if this is too big, we can just select a couple of these things. We can go to SubD, we can select the ring, and then we can insert an edge. And we can say, okay, well, maybe we don't want that whole thing. Maybe we just want that much. And then what we can do is just get rid of those, and that gives us essentially our gasket surface. That's what's going to seal up against the face. And then we can take this inside ring, and I can pull this a little bit, knowing that the outside, right, this outside is essentially touching the face. And so now I can just use regular SubD modeling tools, and I can start pulling like this and pull like that. And then I'm going to scale by holding down drag, right? And that is going to essentially give us our gasket surface. And then I can start adjusting this. And all the while I know that this contact point right here is what I want. And so now basically all I need to do is I need to just get this edge and this piece lined up together a little bit better, right? So I'm going to grab this edge and I'm going to scale it a little bit flatter. And then I'm going to pull it a little bit in like that. And this is kind of a frustrating process, right? So let's do something different. Let's grab and let's make a copy of this surface. And let's hide everything but these two objects. And I'm going to untrim this for now, which seems a little counterintuitive, but that's the plan. I'm going to untrim that, and I'm going to untrim this, and I'm going to untrim these. So I've got as much target as I can get. And in fact, I may actually even extend this surface a little bit more so I can get a larger target area. Oh, right mouse. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this edge by shift double click. I'm going to come over to the SubD tools, and I'm going to change this from points to, or from edges to points. Then I'm going to come back over here to project, and I'm going to, actually I did it backwards. I have to do it this way. So I'm going to project onto, actually, sorry, it was right before. Toggle this. There we go. Now I'm going to go to project, and it's going to project onto that surface. And looks like it got some of them. Let's do this. Let's try this in box mode. Let's see if that works better. Maybe what I need to do is pull these all back here. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's pull them all this way and project them this direction. There we go. Project. And it looks like it projected those. And it looks like it made a copy, which is fine. But what it did was it took all of those vertices and it stuck them to that surface. So now all I need to do is mess with these, the secondary row, and I know that I'm going to be within spitting distance of where I need to be, right? And because this is SubD, it's simple. The model's simple. Everything is pretty easy to deal with. And that gives us a pretty close approximation of having that SubD onto that surface. Now we can add some thickness to this. We're just going to offset this SubD. And, you know, whatever, I don't know, let's say 0.15. And it gives us this creased result. So the first thing we're going to do is just get rid of the creases. Actually, let's get rid of all the creases. And that gives us that nice soft result. In fact, we may want to keep this crease. Sorry about that. And that gives us a gasket that's within spitting distance, right? And we know that this is going to fit. This end out here is going to fit. And we know that this is close enough that we can always just convert this to NURBS and then do a blend surface or some sort of transition surface between the two. That's how I handle the difference between SubD and NURBS. Is I'll get the SubD as close as it needs to be, right? And then once it's within, you know, spitting distance of where I need it to be, I'll convert it to NURBS. I'll make a trimmed gap between the two surfaces, and then I'll just build a blend surface between the two. Again, I apologize for the construction noise. All right, so I'm going to pop this over. I can get rid of this now. And I'm going to move this, mirror this over. And then we can take a look and say, you know, does this make sense and does it need to move and all that kind of stuff. And in this case, it looks like this does actually need to come over here. And we'd adjust that as needed, right? Mirror that one over. And so that would be how we would make our gasket surfaces. And I would probably do some adjusting on this to get this to be a little bit more in line with our part. something like that. And then we'd have to go back and double check it on our model to make sure how the fit was, but that's the basic process. Oh, good God. All right, and so we bring our headlash back, and that gives us our gasket, fitting fairly well to the body. We'd adjust as needed. We'd check our body fits again, and you could actually, if you needed to, project one SubD back onto another. So if you needed to project a few points from the original SubD back onto the last in order to get them closer, you could do that. And the only thing left to do at this point would be to, model the strap, but that would probably be a purchased part. So we probably would not, not model that. Now there is a little detail on the end of this that we neglected, so let's throw that in the fact that this has a little opening in it where the goggle strap actually goes, and then there's actually a little material break here. So let's do that. And I'm going to just do that with wire cut. Like that. That splits that off into a separate piece. Brian James showed me a really cool trick about that too, as far as if you're doing renderings. If you throw edge softening on this, the edge softening actually gives you the little reveal between the two parts, which I thought was a cool trick. You should definitely be watching Brian James videos if you are not. Dude is really, really, really talented. I'm going to use wire cut again, and then just delete the part. And then that gives us, opportunity for material break and stuff like that. So, and in this case, I'm going to shift command drag all of this stuff over here and delete it. And then I'm going to shift command drag all this stuff over here, mirror, join it back up. Now let's throw this in rendered mode and see how we're doing. I think we're almost out of here. I think for an hour and 10 minutes, we're probably in pretty good shape. We could bring our creepy headlash back. See that we've got, for a concept model, we could throw that through a printer because it is solid. So we could throw it through a printer and do some fit tests with it, and then do some more adjusting and things like that from there. So that would probably be as far as I would take this right now before I would throw it through a printer and fit check it. Thanks everybody for watching. I'm Kyle Houchins, tech and a trainer for McNeil. This is Getting Started Rhino for Mac. Go make great stuff. Thanks. Bye.